Okay. As we prepare our hearts and minds today to engage the text today, remember God's willful intention of us. He designed us with the ability to taste and remember how things are by their flavors. He gave us hands that are wired to nerves to feel when things are too hot or when they're unsafe, or to feel when they're nice, soft, and tender. God created us with many senses, but today I want to focus on our eyesight. Our view of Jesus shapes all of our interactions. If I picture Jesus as some madman running up and down Judea, then my life will reflect that. But if I view him as some offering to a God who just wants to kill him, then how I view others and how I view him will also reflect that kind of understanding. The Bible tells us of one story, and it's Jesus' story. In today's passage, we're going to be spending a lot of time reflecting on who Jesus is and what he's calling each of us to do. So let us open our word to Matthew chapter 20, verses 17 through 34. It's a long passage. I need y'all to buckle up. And as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside, and on the way he said to them, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified, and he will be raised on the third day." And then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him something and he said to her, "What do you want?" And she said to him, "Say to these two sons of mine, who are to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your kingdom." And Jesus answered, "You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm going to drink?" And they said to him, "We are able." And he said, "You will drink my cup. But to sit at my right and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those to whom it's been prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard, they were indignant with the two brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. But whoever would want to be great among you must be your servant. And who would ever want to be first among you first must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." And as they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed him. And behold, there were two blind men sitting up by the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was walking by, they cried out, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." And the crowd rebuked them, telling them to be silent. But they cried out all the more, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." And stopping, Jesus called them and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." And Jesus in pity touched their eyes, and they immediately recovered their sight and followed him. The group is on the way to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. And since we know the story, Jesus is about to die at this celebration. Though the disciples are oblivious, Jesus reminds them for the third time that this is imminent. Let us recall Matthew 16. In Matthew 16, Peter confesses Jesus as the Christ, right? But moments later, Peter rebukes Jesus for predicting the cross. And Jesus tells him, "Get behind me, Satan." So we think for a moment that Peter sees Jesus. Or does he? Jesus condemns Peter for calling him Satan for trying to remove Jesus from the cross. Satan in the temptation tries to remove Jesus from the cross by giving him worldly power. As followers of Jesus, we must keep our eyes on the cross to see Jesus in the correct view. The cross is so utterly important. So for the third time, Jesus is telling his disciples, hey, this is about to happen. As followers of Jesus, keeping the cross in our vision is picking up our cross every day and doing as Jesus did. The Christian life is centered on the cross. We pick it up because this is what God does. He lays this down for others. We too lay down our wants and needs by adopting the same attitude of obedience as Jesus did. If the cross is what reconciles us to God, then it is through the cross that we participate in what God does. Jesus came to show us what being God is like. God pours himself out. We too must be poured out. What happens when we assign him a role that he did not claim, nor did he ever claim? Now let me introduce to you two brothers. Jesus asked them, are you able to drink from the cup that I'm going to drink? And they said, we are able. And he indeed says, you will drink my cup. And as followers of Jesus, we must keep our eyes on the cup. This is the cup that Jesus is referring to. The cup of suffering, the cup of salvation, the cup of service. Yet the two brothers and their mother want position, security, safety, and power. If I'm honest, if I'm being truly honest, Moises, vice president of God, sounds a whole lot better than Moises, the electrician from Nevada. Right? Position is what we yearn for here in this world, but we need to give that up. Do the disciples even see Jesus? They're on their way to Jerusalem for Passover. Jesus pulls them aside from the crowd and he tells them about his upcoming passion. And they're talking to him about worldly power and worldly glory. Jesus is making it very noticeable that the two brothers have no idea what they're talking about. Jesus' cup is a cup of suffering, laying down his life for others. And think about it. As the narrative goes, the 10 disciples, when they heard it, they were so upset with the brothers. A distorted view of Jesus creates conflict. Isn't it tragic when we see people who claim to know Jesus do this whole Jesus way wrong? Does it not cause you great frustration when you see others leading people into their own personal goals and their own personal things that aren't related to God at all? Of course it does. Jesus is absolutely frustrated. The Son of Man, it says, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. And so what must we? Jesus became poor so that in him we might become rich. In the same way, the deprivation of our wants, let's say riches, fame, power, must be let go for the sake of living like Christ did on this earth. Jesus already told us what the cup is. He will be delivered to the Gentiles and be crucified. We too must be crucified for the building up of the body. Our lives must be shaped by keeping our eyes on the cup. Now let me tell you a story. Eusebius of Caesarea, the great church historian, tells us of a young slave girl named Blandina, who in her martyrdom, or is her persecution, she's hung up on a stake in the shape of a cross, and while she's on the stake, her constant prayers greatly inspired her fellow victims, who in her saw the one who was crucified in the form of their sister, to convince all who suffer for Christ that they have eternal fellowship with the living God. Her body was hanging, yet heaven was standing. Now I ask you, who did you see? Did you see a weak girl on the cross? Or did you see Christ in her? In the way that she acted, in the way that she poured herself out. This is our lives. We are Blandina. We are James and John. We are little reflections of Christ in this world when we decide to take his cup. The Christian walk is shaped and guided by the cup. Now let me introduce to you two men. Yet these two men are blind. They literally cannot see. They must be led from place to place. All their life they need help. And when the crowd sees them with their eyes, all they see is a nuisance. They see someone who's in the way of this kingdom march of Jesus. And the crowd, like us at times, has a plan of what things should happen and how things should take place. Yet it's clear that the crowd doesn't even see Jesus for who he is. Jesus shows us who's truly blind. When James and John and their mother ask him for power and prestige, Jesus rejects their wish. They had a self-promoting wish for power and control, but the blind men asked Jesus for mercy. Why would they say that? Must be because they saw him. They're blind and yet they saw him. They remembered the covenant to David. They see him as the root of Jesse, as it says in Isaiah. And they ask him to have mercy on him. And the word that they use for mercy is also the same word for steadfast covenantal love. These blind men are seeing him because they see him and his purpose, and they ask him for mercy. And we know that the Lord delights in having mercy on us. Jesus is moved to his core, and because they see him, although those with working eyes did not, Jesus heals them. Jesus reveals to us who sees him, not physically, but who sees him for who he is, as the Savior of the world. We should look and evaluate how we see Jesus. Is he my get out of jail free card? Is he my security and employment so that I can have a good job and a good career? Do I see him as a punching bag that God needed so that he could finally love me? Or do I see him as the crucified and risen one who came and died for me and led a life of an example of what I can do with him and in him and through him? James and John gave up their life of fishing for Jesus. Blandina, the lowest of the low in Roman rank, gives up her life for the sake of others. Friends, I'm calling you to give up your selfish desires for fame and fortune. This is not just a degree for a job. This is anything and everything that matters. You were made to be the image of God. Jesus shows you what it's like to be the image of God, so I challenge you to go and do it. Don't just pretend anymore. Find a place to volunteer. There are many places that need listeners. The senior homes need people to just come and be with them. They're alone and sad, and their life is coming to an end. Refugees have just lost their homes to violence, to war. Families that have been torn apart, and they need people who will sit with them. Foster youth in our world, in our country, need mentors. Aged out foster care kids need friends. Go out there and make an impact. Not for your own sake, but because of the cup that's been set before you. Thank you.